I think we're going to get started, and people can log on as the presentation is going on. And I'm going to turn it over to Karen Goldberg, our WRJ moderator, to get us started. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Allie. Welcome to the 9th installment of the WRJ Women Act webinar series. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. My name is Karen Goldberg. I'm a member of Women of Isaiah in Lafayette, California, and a member of the WRJ North American Board. I'm also co-chair of the inaugural WRJ Social Justice Conference taking place next May in Washington, D.C. WRJ focuses on 6 high-priority social justice issues that help shape our advocacy work and maximize our capacity to mobilize WRJ members in making a positive difference in our communities and around the world. These issues include pay equity and fair wages, women's health and reproductive rights, violence against women, economic justice, gender equality and religious pluralism in Israel, and immigration reform. Within the WRJ Women Act Advocacy series, we have been able to discuss many aspects of these issues, including past Supreme Court cases, the current state of women's reproductive rights, women's health programming around Breast Cancer Awareness Month, human trafficking in the United States, pending legislation concerning immigration reform, and much more. One theme that is present in all of the issues we focus on is gender equality. And as we continue the fight for equality worldwide, we cannot forget the exclusion of women under religious pretexts. In today's session, we will discuss the issue of gender equality and religious pluralism in Israel. WRJ is committed to working with our Israeli partners, including Women of the Wall, the Israel Religious Action Center, and the Israel Movement for Progressive Judaism in fighting for equal rights for women and religious pluralism in Israel. The issue is one that is near and dear to my own heart. I visited Israel for the first time in May 2017 on a trip with WRJ. We celebrated Rosh Chodesh with Women of the Wall, and I experienced firsthand the shocking level of intolerance aimed at women against women like me, simply for singing, praying, and chanting Torah. The experience really changed my life. It's where I found my social justice voice, and I have been speaking out in my own community and on social media ever since about the injustice that I experienced at the Kotel and why I feel it's important for us to advocate for women's rights in Israel and to support the work that Women of the Wall is doing. We are lucky to have with us Allie Mallinger, our dynamic WRJ Advocacy and Communications Associate, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Allie for organizing and coordinating our session today. And now I will turn it over to Allie to discuss the logistics of today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Karen. As Karen just said, my name is Allison Mallinger. I'm the Advocacy and Communications Associate for WRJ. This session will be recorded and available to anyone following the session, and it will be also available on wrj.org/womenact. If you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to use the Q&A box, which is available within your toolbar on your screen, and the chat function. At the end of the session, we will have an opportunity to ask both our expert speakers any questions you may have. So please feel free to share those questions then, but you can post them whenever you feel the need. And I will turn it back to Karen to introduce our expert speakers.
Okay, thanks, Allie. I am delighted and honored to introduce our 2 expert speakers for today's webinar. Lesley Sachs is the Executive Director of Women of the Wall. She was one of the founding members of Isha Leisha, Haifa's Feminist Center, and worked for 10 years in the Israel Women's Network. In 2014, she was awarded the National Council of Jewish Women's Jewel Baluch Outstanding Israeli Feminist Award. Over the years, Lesley has served as Executive Director of the Israel Religious Action Center, Vice President of the World Union for Progressive Judaism, and Founding Director of Project Kesher Israel. She also has served on the Board of Directors for the Jerusalem Women's Shelter and Board of Directors for the Jewish National Fund, Karen Kayemet L'Yisrael, and currently is chair of the Pre-Army Mechina Michmanim in Jaffa. Rabbi Allison Berry serves as co-senior rabbi of Temple Shalom in Newton, Massachusetts, and works in partnership with Rabbi Laura Abersley as they lead the clergy and staff team of their congregation. They are the first female co-senior rabbis in the world. Rabbi Berry joined the Temple Shalom community in 2011 as the Associate Rabbi and Director of the grades K through 6 Shacharit Education Program. A strong social justice advocate, Rabbi Berry is deeply committed to the fact that Temple Shalom is a diverse community, welcoming people of both traditional and non-traditional backgrounds, interfaith families, Jews by choice, non-Jewish partners, members of the LGBTQ community, people with physical, social, or cognitive challenges, and those individuals who are really searching for meaning. Rabbi Berry has attended Rosh Chodesh services with Women of the Wall and will be sharing her personal experience with us today, as well as her thoughts about how we can make a difference.
Thank you so much, Karen. We're going to turn it over to Lesley now.
Hello, it's such a pleasure to be with you today. Shalom from from Tel Aviv, sorry. I've been asked to speak today about two topics that are dear to my heart and our hearts. The first is to talk a little bit about the struggle that Israel is facing with the nation-state law, and then I'll move on to talk about the unique struggles we have in Israel as women. So one thing that we need to remember that is really an underline on both these subjects is the fact that Israel doesn't have a constitution, and that changes everything. Most of our laws, or at least many of the appeals to the Supreme Court, we have won on the basis of the Declaration of Independence. But when we look at this new law, which has passed, and it is definitely the most anti-democratic legislation, and it's going to become one of the basic laws in Israel. It's going to influence us in every way possible. All those values that we hold dear to our hearts, in addition to our battles on gender equality and religious freedom, but things like racism, we will really find it much harder to fight these issues. What this law basically says is that Jewish is in and democratic is out. The word Jewish appears in this law 10 times, and the word democracy or democratic in any way that we use it doesn't appear at all in the whole legislation. It's going to impair and weaken our ability to fight any kind of damaging anti-democratic legislation in the Supreme Courts in Israel. And that is one of the main avenues that we use today. I want to just touch on three main discriminating points in this new bill. The first one is the demotion of Arabic as a second language in Israel. And you can imagine what that says, if we haven't said it in any other way, to the Arab population in Israel. The second thing is that this new bill gives a national priority to advance Jewish settlements. And when I say settlements, it's not settlements over the Green Line necessarily, but it's cities and small towns, any settlement. And we saw a terrible example this week of what this law can bring to. And it happened in Afula, a city in the north of Israel, where the new city council swore allegiance to the Jewish character of Afula. And they based this is the first time this ever happened in Israel. They based this on this new law. And that week, already this week, Arab citizens who were wanted to walk into one of the public parks in Afula were forbidden. So, you know, this is really reminds us of some of the darkest days, years of ours as Jews in the world, when we were not permitted to settle in different cities, walk in different places. And, you know, we know from Yord legislation in the 50s that separate is not equal. And that is what we are seeing here. And that kind of brings me to the very, very easily to the other subject, and that is what those very unique battles that we are holding as women in Israel. Again, because there is no constitution, and because there's no separation between state and religion here, and because of the way that of the political alliances in our government, we see that there is a minority of ultra-Orthodox that are really controlling so many areas in Israel and in our life. And, you know, we've been fighting for 30 years. Women of the Wall have been fighting for 30 years at the Western Wall. And I say it, and I'll say it again. We need to know that this is not a religious battle. This is a classic gender battle. This is a battle about power and status and money. And the thing is that the use of religious terminology gives that illusion that it is supposedly a religious battle. Now, women of the Wall, because we are Orthodox women, Reform and conservative, and because we pray within halachic boundaries, and because we have been praying for the last 30 years in the women's section of the Western Wall, nobody can claim that we are doing something against the Jewish halakha, the Jewish law. And so it is so clear to everybody that this battle is not a religious battle. And it is the same as other battles that we are now fighting in Israel, again under that pretext of religion. What we see is that what has happened at the Kotel, at the Western Wall, isn't contained there. It kind of flows into the public sphere. And that attempt to silence women, segregate them, silence them, is happening in so many other places. I wanted to give you an example of two battles that we are waging now, women in Israel. The first one is in the Israel Defense Force. And I need to go back here and you know, I served in the army several years ago. The Israel Defense Force was never, most of the positions there were never open to women. And you can imagine how a young woman who is just at that age when she's forming her dreams and aspirations and thinking about what she can do in life, and she finds herself in a structure where it's very clear that she is the bottom of the pyramid, and most of the more interesting, the most challenging positions are not open to her. In 1995, a young woman called Allison went to the Supreme Court. She was represented by the Israel Women's Network, and she wanted to be a pilot. Now, what happened as a result of her appeal was that the Israel Defense Force had to change completely because the precedent-setting ruling that was given on that case forced the Israel Defense Force to open all positions up to women. And things changed dramatically since then, since 1995. And what we're feeling now is a backlash. And this backlash is felt by women who are now in the army, because many of the religious soldiers are demanding change. They're not willing, for instance, to have women instructors. And nowadays there are many, many women instructors, tank instructors, flight instructors, parachuting, every subject that you can imagine. Women have really, I would even say, taken over in many ways. But now, just recently, there was a case that hit the headlines where a group of men soldiers who were going through a parachuting course, they turned their backs on the woman soldier instructor. Now again, a lot of this is under using wording, the jargon of religion or religious terminology, but it has nothing to do with it. It is an attempt to push women out, to silence them in many ways. Another example is that women soldiers have been instructed not to wear white t-shirts during the exercises that they do, the sport exercises that they do in the army, and many other cases. And unfortunately, the Israel Defense Force is changing some of its approaches, and we're finding that young certain positions that were open to women soldiers are not, and that ruling that we achieved in 1995, we are fighting to keep it, to hold up. And it is so important that the Israel Defense Force does not buckle in and change its policy. So that's one area. Another area, and these are just examples because we're seeing it everywhere. Another example is the higher education. Universities are opening more and more classes which is segregated. Men students, women students are sitting separately, and there's a partition in the middle. The higher education organization claims that the students want it, and since they are the ones that give the financial backing to the universities are complying. But just recently, an independent researcher did a very large survey amongst the students themselves, the religious students, and it is not so. They are not the ones who are pushing for this change. It is coming down from a political level. We also see in events that are happening in the public sphere that more and more events do not want women on the stage as speakers, as singers, for certainly not. And again, just recently in Tel Aviv, there was a group that was trying to hold a segregated event in a public area, and luckily the Tel Aviv municipality said no segregated events in the public domain. But let's just go back to Afula. In Afula, I'm sure today there would be no problem in holding a segregated event. And again, we've got to understand that any segregated event that is not in a synagogue or in a wedding hall is very, very dangerous, because you start off by segregating, putting a partition, men and women separately, and then you can't have a woman speaking or singing or talking. Iraq I think it's 2 years ago, won a court case against a public radio station that wouldn't have women on the public radio station. They would only have men. Men were reading recipes, cook recipes. And this is something that we won, but this might become harder and harder to fight in the courts. And this is a very unique aspect of in Israel, something that I know you don't experience in the United States, because there is a separation between state and religion. Women of the Wall, as Karen told you, are there at the beginning, on the first day of the Jewish month, and we really find ourselves in a very difficult situation, physically and emotionally. There is a lot of violence against us on our way out, a lot of spitting. And, I only this last month gave more thought to why we feel so humiliated when someone spits at us. And it is not considered by the police as violence, but it is violence. And we are the one who are really suffering from this violence. But I can assure you that we have no intention of giving up in any of these battles. And we know that, you know, you are all behind us and supporting us, and that gives us really a lot of strength. I want to end by inviting each and every one of you to join us in March to celebrate 30 years of Women of the Wall. The WRJ are organizing a mission, and we're really, really excited and waiting for you to come. That is a wonderful way of saying out loud, we're here and we're here to stay, and we're not going to let anyone drive us away. Those of you who can't come on the mission, there's still a way for you to be part of it. And we're launching a Shabbat Wow for all those congregations who will not be joining us. You can look at our site and our Facebook for more information about it. You can hold it in your shul on Friday or Saturday. The 8th of March, International Women's Day, is also a Friday. It's also Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the Jewish month. God has really organized everything so well for us to celebrate our 30th anniversary. I want to end by wishing everybody a happy Hanukkah. And we will be, as we have the last 4 years, going on Tuesday to the Western Wall, trying to bring in our own menorah to light it in the women's section. The national Israeli menorah is in the men's section. And as you can understand, that only men light it. Every night a different dignitary is invited. We've demanded our right to have the same kind of menorah in the women's section, or move it to the back. Of course, the Rabbi of the Wall says no, but every year we find another way of bringing one in and lighting it. So follow us on Tuesday to see what will happen. And I want to thank you all, and women of Reform Judaism, for being such strong supporters and allies, not only of Women of the Wall, but of all our battles in Israel. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lesley. That was a lot of information for our participants to hear from, and gave a lot of interesting background. We're now going to hear from Allison Berry, and we'll also hear more about the WRJ Israel trips towards the end of the session.
Hi, everyone. It's an incredible honor to be here with all of you today. And thank you, Allison, for setting this up. And it's been a pleasure to work on preparing for this. To Lesley, we have not had the opportunity to meet yet, but I have followed your work for so many years of my career, and you are truly an inspiration. And I'm really awestruck in many ways to be on this call with you today. Thank you for all you do. And really your tenacity and just tireless effort to continue to say that we will not give up, and that we will continue to do this work. We need you so much in the Jewish world, and your voice and your continued persistence to try to make the world a better place. So I have just recently moved into my role as co-senior rabbi at Temple Shalom. And in my previous capacity, I was a rabbi educator and an associate rabbi for many years. I was never called upon to publicly speak about Israel or sermonize about Israel. And I knew when I took this position on that was rapidly about to change. And I spent really all of last year very afraid about what did it mean to find my voice, what did it mean to just share my love of Israel, and also to really lead a community forward as to what it meant to be engaged progressive Jews who care about Israel. And so I was very lucky that I went to Israel this past summer on a seminar for progressive rabbis with APAC of all organizations. And they really, I think, helped me to find a voice about what all of this means to me. Along with my experience with APAC, I've been with Women of the Wall on Rosh Chodesh on several occasions. I had probably one of the most difficult experiences this summer when I was there in July. And I think that what it did is it gave me a sense and that I needed actually, of righteous anger to now say I want to go back to the United States and continue to give voice to the experience and what I'm feeling and figure out how to move things forward with partnerships that I know that we desperately need in the United States, and I think Israelis who are working on these issues need as well. So a little bit about my experience, and that this particular Rosh Chodesh in July was one of the worst months in recent memory. And few of the things that were happening is really, it was awful in the sense that we were spit on and things were thrown at us. And we did manage to read Torah, and a young woman became bat mitzvah, which was unbelievably beautiful and moving. And all of this, unfortunately, was as it usually is. And the time came for us to try to leave the hotel as a group, and the security was even more absent than it often is. And it rapidly degenerated from being dangerous to being truly violent. And that finally and eventually security had to intervene. They formed a human chain to get us onto a bus that was driven onto the hotel plaza to get many of us off the plaza. It was so dangerous. And what I wasn't aware of is once we got on the bus and Nat Hoffman was there, Lesley, I think you were there, and Nat held up this prayer book that you can see the photo of that had been burned. And it was an absolutely appalling, visceral, horrifying, one of the worst I've ever had moments. It brought back so much of the Jewish history and past of what it means to burn books, and that we were people who have experienced this. And so what does it mean that the ultra-Orthodox Jews who were there actually could light a prayer book on fire? And it was just a moment of reckoning, I think, for me personally. And I suspect for many of us in that moment about where this had gone and how far this had degenerated. I admit, and I encourage you to all do the same, that I came back really making a decision that I needed to speak out, and I needed to find a voice in ways that had previously I had been afraid to do. And so I not only preached about this and have preached about this twice since to my community, I got on the phone with the Consul General of New England, actually, and had a meeting with him where we had a very difficult conversation. He's a representative of Netanyahu's government. But what it also became clear to me from doing that is that all of us can do that. It's not just rabbis who can make those phone calls. We have representatives of the foreign ministry in the Israeli government here in the United States. Many of us work to cultivate relationships with them. They want to work with us, whether it's because they want to do programming with us or support Israelis that are living in our communities. But I think one of the most important things we can do is to have a voice with those officials. And so now we have meetings. I'm having meetings with the new Consul General. There's been a changeover in staff on a fairly regular basis to continue to say, we want you to know that we know what happens in Israel. We are watching this. This matters to us. This matters to our community. And as we continue to figure out what's the nature of Israeli diaspora relations, and if you want us as rabbis to figure out a path forward to be ardent supporters and lovers of Israel, how do we do that in a way that also then makes sure that our values and who we are as Jews, as progressive Jews, is affirmed and something that we see as a continued conversation on the national stage in Israel. So that's a bigger picture project, but I think that as WRJ, we can have a voice in really doing that and really organizing to be heard politically here with people that represent the Israeli government. It's much easier than we think it is. I was very intimidated by the idea of doing this, and it actually was remarkably meaningful. Other pieces that I think are continue to be vitally important about how do we make sure we're knowledgeable? How do we become and continue to be good advocates? I think it's following all sorts of organizations like IRAC, the Israel Reform Action Center, Women of the Wall online, and on social media, making sure we like their pages and reading regularly the things they post, what's going on. We can watch every single month when Nashot HaKotel, Women of the Wall, is at the wall for Rosh Chodesh. You have to wake up a little early, and even earlier if you're in California. I'm looking at Karen. But you know, if you happen to be up in the middle of the night, it's on, and you should watch. You should tune in. It is so worth making sure that you're aware on any given month what is going on, what's happening. Other places to look are to make sure that we follow the national news in Israel. So subscribe to Times of Israel or subscribe to Haaretz in English. It feels, if you're not well versed, it feels intimidating at first, but the more you read and you read and you read, the more you'll be able to develop your own sense of what is happening and who are writers that you appreciate and who is articulating and calling out and forth the voices that need to be heard. Other pieces that I think are meaningful is that we have worked in the past with our local sisterhood here at Temple Shalom. I think a few of our sisterhood members are on this call. We have a really incredibly strong sisterhood who has done work to promote Women of the Wall, who occasionally will run campaigns, photo campaigns, especially with all of us wearing talit about 5 years back. But on a regular basis to make sure that women on a local level in our sisterhoods are learning together, having these conversations together about why do our sisters and fellow women in Israel who are doing this work need our friendship and need our support. And then I think the last piece, and we're talking a lot about this Israel trip, but it's not just about going to Israel to celebrate Nashot HaKotel, Women of the Wall. I think the number one thing we do is cultivate relationships with Israelis who are doing this work. The best way forward is to be friends, for us to know each other, for us to be in dialogue about what matters, to know about all sorts of cases that are pending. I had no idea about some of the stories, the newest ones that Lesley just shared. And the best way that we can hear what's happening is to feel like we are our friends, we are family, and we are intricately connected to each other. And so what happens in Israel matters, and on every level to us, and vice versa. And that how do we continue to make sure that we know each other? There are our cultural differences, and let's talk about them. Let's laugh about them. Let's eat together. Let's share our stories. Let's share our challenges on both sides. We know now in the United States we've entered, it's not we're entering, we've entered into a new era as we are really thinking about what it means to live in a world where we don't always feel secure. Israelis have experienced that their entire lives. I think they have so much to teach us about how we get up each and every day and make meaning and continue to live our values and to be who we are. And so there are so many ways that we can be involved. If you have yet to jump in, I think a great way to start is to travel to Israel with the WRJ, but it's also to even just go to a local convention or a local sisterhood event and say, I want to learn more, and how can I get connected? It's to explore websites, and it's to figure out where the connections may be in your own community. So the last thing I'll leave us with, when we think about our relationship with Israel as American Jews today, one of my favorite ideas that I talk about as often as I can was penned by a performer. He made Aliyah to Israel named Rabbi Greengrass. And in 2004, he talked about the concept of simultaneously hugging and wrestling with Israel. What I personally will say is I love Israel. My family is there. I travel there as often as I can. I lived there in rabbinical school. I believe in a robust, meaningful future for the state of Israel. I believe in Zionism. And yet at the same time, we have consistent and constant work to do to make it the place that we envision. And that we as Americans should listen to our Israeli counterparts, work with them, and know that we all should continue to be engaged. And even though things are confusing and sometimes difficult and complex, to disengage means we no longer have a voice at all. And so I think that the idea of partnership and hugging and wrestling together to create a better society, a more just society, is really the way forward. And to do that, we have to know each other and we have to be in relationship. And I believe deeply that all of us can do this. Women have a profound role to play as we move forward into the future. So again, thank you for having me and to be part of this conversation.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Barry. Now we're going to open up for any questions that you may have for either Lesley or Rabbi Barry. You can use the Q&A box in your toolbar.
Okay, maybe while we're waiting for other people to ask questions. So Lesley, I had a question for you. We know that the situation at the Kotel is controlled by this small minority of ultra-Orthodox, and we know that Women of the Wall continues to fight tirelessly for women's rights. How do the rest of Israelis feel about gender equality at the Wall? Like, you know what I mean? What is sort of the general sentiment? Is this an important issue for like a majority of the population?
I always, you got to divide it between people who pray and people who don't pray. I'm talking now more about the liberal Jews in Israel. Liberal, not in the sense of reform or conservative, but liberal in a general sense. So people the number of people who are willing to wake up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning and drive up to Jerusalem to join us is not a major number. We are usually between 150 and 200 women every Rosh Chodesh, and there's a group of some 50 to 70 men who come to support us. But then you have a wider circle, and the next circle is those who support us in so many other ways. They write about us, they sometimes join us, and one of those groups is the paratroopers who liberated the Western Wall in 1967, and they decided to join us because this is not the Western Wall that they wanted to see, and this is not the Israel that they want. And it's wonderful the way these men who are completely different DNA than us religious women are, come to sometimes even to protect us. And then you have another circle around that, which includes many people who really admire what we're doing, who think we're fighting a very important battle. That includes, of course, feminists, but they won't join us. And maybe even the Western Wall is not that important to them. But what more and more women and men are realizing now is that it is just, let's say, the core of the battle in a way, because the Western Wall is our Mecca, our, so important and so visible as far as media goes. And as far as Jews all over the world, it gets a lot of coverage, but the discrimination that's been going on for so many years there, really it kind of has flown, has oozed out to the to the public sphere all over Israel now. And I think that the more that people are realizing this, Karen, the more they're feeling connected to our battle and supporting our battle. And again, that doesn't mean they're going to wake up and join us to pray, but we do meet more and more people who say, you know what, I've got to do it once. I'm not a praying person, but I've got to do it just to support you. So yes, we're feeling a tremendous amount of support from more and more Israelis who did not see the importance of this battle beforehand, and it's really growing, and that's something that's very, very important to us. I just wanted to say, Rabbi Barry, while you were talking, I was nodding my head vigorously because you talked about how important and how influential that involvement of each and every one of you in North America is on Israel. And I have so many examples of how influential it can be. Member of the Knesset, Michael Oren, who used to be an ambassador, told Anat Hoffman and myself how the pressure from North America really changed things when he went to Netanyahu and he talked about the importance of doing something, and that's how the Kotel agreement, which at the moment is frozen, how it started. So I really think that it's important that everybody, each and everybody, realizes that they, as an individual, also as part of an organization, but as an individual, can make a difference. And thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, actually, on those lines, I was going to ask that question. You know, we in North America obviously don't live in Israel, but we, as Rabbi Barry and I both feel, you know, many of us feel it is our duty to speak up about issues that we see in Israel. And I was wondering, you know, is our voice, is it helpful? Is it persuasive? Do you think we speak up enough? You know, could we do more?
Yes, you can do more. Yes, on all accounts. Firstly, it is important. It does make a difference, and one can always do more. I think that speaking out of levels, as Rabbi Barry said, it can be on the level of just blogging and writing, and that kind of speaking out, and it can be phoning Congress people, you know, American officials, and saying, you know, what's happening over there to women, you know, this cannot continue, and we care about it, and you need to get involved. It can be on so many different levels. I don't know if, Allison, do I have a moment to tell a story, or do we have questions?
You can tell a short story.
I'll make it short. So there was a new police commissioner at the Western Wall who asked to meet with Anat and myself, and we're used to these terrible meetings where they really look down at us. And he said, "Can I come to your office?" And we were really excited. We said, "Of course, of course." And he came and he said, "Tell me about Women of the Wall." So we told him. And he even listened. He cared. This is a police officer who's in charge of the Western Wall in the Old City. And, you know, and he asked questions. And I said, you know, I want to hear about the woman who raised you to be such a caring feminist. He said, no. It's not my mother. It's not my wife. I was in North America on a mission where they took army officers. And we were at a federation sitting at tables in Atlanta. And each one of us was supposed to talk about what they're doing. And I said, "Oh, I'm going back to Israel to a new job. I'm going to be in charge of the Old City and the West Wall." He said, within seconds, the whole room was attacking him, and they were all talking about. It was the time of the arrests when we were being arrested left, right, and center. And he said to me, "I care about my brothers and sisters in North America. And I understand how important it is to them. And I realize that we are offending their Judaism. And while I am in charge, you will not be arrested." So this is just an example of how you managed to bring us at least a year of peace and quiet while he was a police commissioner in charge of the Old City and the Western Wall.
We do have a couple of questions. I guess this is for Lesley. You said this is a gender battle and not a religious battle. So how can we use that sort of frame from a North American perspective? The fact that it's
yeah, well, whenever someone's talking to you, arguing with you, or discussing it with you, and they start bringing up you know, halakha, Jewish law, and starting and talk to you with, again, religious terminology. I have no better words for it. You need to say, no, this is not a battle about religion. These women are praying in the women's section. They are not doing anything against halakha, against Jewish law, praying out loud, wearing a talit, putting on tefillin, and reading from the Torah are permitted. The daughters of Rashi did it. There's no problem with it. This is an attempt or a wish to continue controlling the Western Wall. And I think that's important information to know when you talk to officials, rabbis who are maybe not liberal, or other people who might not be liberal, or maybe who think that it's not permitted religiously. You need to be very clear. Yes, it is, and this is not a religious battle. It's taking place at the Western Wall, the most sacred place. And one of the reasons that it's happening there, that it started there, is because, being the rabbi of the wall, it's a very lucrative position. They have a budget. He has a budget of $20 million a year, taxpayers' money, to run the Western Wall. And it is the focal point. Any important person is taken to the Western Wall, from Madonna to the President of the United States. So of course he doesn't want to give up control there. This is really a battle about control. And it's true, and we as women know that it's the same with other gender battles. It's how to, keep in charge, keep the reins, keep in control. Same thing at the Western Wall.
Yeah. Thank you. Ali, questions out there, or are we ready to?
There was one question I think that Rabbi Feldman asked that I think is really worth us just for 2 minutes asking Lesley, if that's okay. I know we have to get off in a moment, but I think it concerns the 30th anniversary celebration in Israel. What Rabbi Feldman had asked, or is Women of the Wall expecting any particular concerns regarding harassment or violence around this 30th anniversary? What can we anticipate? And what work can we do, those who are going to prepare?
So I would probably say that there will be tremendous, unlike most Rosh Chodeshes, Rashi Chodeshim we say in Hebrew, the 30th anniversary, there will be tremendous police protection because you're coming, because they don't want to mess up, with you North Americans. So with this delegation, I am sure that, it will be completely safe. I doubt we will have much harassment on the 30th. We will certainly be writing to the police commissioner, the head of the police, and the minister of Interior Defense, saying, we have got a lot of people coming from abroad. You want to make sure that nothing happens to anyone. So I really want to calm any feelings of anxiety as on the 30th. And I do want to say that 2 months ago we brought our own protection. We brought bodyguards. So if we have to do that on the 30th, we'll do it. But I don't believe it'll be necessary. And we will have transportation to the Western Wall and from the Western Wall. So I'm sure it'll be a wonderful, wonderful celebration of joy and sisterhood. It'll be really a joyful event.
Thank you.
Marla, is there anything else you would like to add to that question? Okay, I will take that as a no. If there are any other questions that anyone has a last minute question, they can add it to the Q&A box. Okay, then I'll turn it back to Karen to wrap us up.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lesley and Rabbi Barry, for sharing your thoughts and insights with us today. I think you are both incredible role models of social action for Jewish women everywhere. And after hearing all you had to say, I'm sure that many of our listeners are inspired to consider traveling to Israel and experiencing in person what's happening at the Kotel and what Women of the Wall are doing, and establishing some of these relationships that Rabbi Barry was talking about with Israelis. So I'd like to take this opportunity to tell everyone that WRJ is offering 4 unique opportunities to travel to Israel over the next 2 years. I encourage you to take advantage of one or more of these trips, where you can join a network of like-minded progressive Jewish women in Israel and North America. And I can tell you, having been on one of these trips, it is the trip of a lifetime. Each trip will include worship at the Kotel on Rosh Chodesh with Women of the Wall. And each trip has a unique itinerary and will visit different parts of the country. You can find dates and trip details on our WRJ website. The first trip is happening in March of 2019. And as part of that trip, we will be joining Women of the Wall for their 30-year anniversary Let Me Hear Your Voice event. We're celebrating, as Lesley explained, International Women's Day and Rosh Chodesh Adar 2. We will be commemorating Women of the Wall's 30 years of resilience and showing our support for their ongoing battle for women's rights. I personally am thrilled to be going on this trip, and I hope that many of you will come too. It's going to be amazing. You don't want to miss it. And I have to say that the deadline to sign up for this, the WRJ part of this trip, is tomorrow. So get off this webinar and go ahead and sign up for this trip, okay? And join me, and it's going to be fabulous. So. And so I guess in conclusion, I'm just going to say thanks again to Lesley, Rabbi Barry, and also Ali Mallinger, and all of you who attended this webinar today. I hope that you all found it as informational and inspiring as I did. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. So just for a couple more updates, so you all will be receiving a recording of this session following the webinar, and also an evaluation form. Feel free to fill it out so we can make these sessions as catered to our audience as possible. And also you'll be getting more information about our next upcoming webinars, one on going to be WRJ's connection to the United Nations. And then later on next year, we'll have a session dedicated to asylum seekers. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.